Visiting Old Town Portsmouth is like stepping back in time. And since Portsmouth is the home of the oldest shipyard in the United States, it goes without saying that the city's filled with history. Well, February is National Black History Month, and to celebrate that, the city is sponsoring events and programs throughout the month. We'll tell you all about them right here and right now on this episode of Portsmouth Now. Welcome to this February 2025 episode of Portsmouth Now. I'm your host, Rob Lauer. Established in 1752, Portsmouth is a treasure trove of history. This month, the city's museums will be focusing on its rich Black history. Here's Erin Colston to tell us what's in store. Erin, welcome back to Portsmouth Now.
Thanks for having me, Rob.
Now, you were here today. You'll be back a little bit later in the show to tell us about the Children's Museum of Virginia, which you're the manager, but you're basically here to represent all of the museums at Portsmouth to tell us about their Black History Month activities and programs.
Yeah, absolutely. We're super excited about Black History Now and all the things that we have going on between now and basically Juneteenth. So for more information, you can always check out blkhistorynow.com. All of our events are on there, as well as any additional information about other events throughout the city. So we're super excited. We have 4 events opening this spring across our museums. The first is at the Portsmouth Colored Community Library Museum, and that exhibit is already open. It's called Forging Hampton Roads, a history of Black labor. And so the exhibit is about local individuals from the Black community who have contributed to what Hampton Roads looks like today. So everything from John Mallory Phillips, who created the region's first Black resorts in Hampton Roads, to a slave named Aaron and his contribution to canoes and the waterfront in the area. Wow. Yeah, it's a really incredible exhibit with a lot of neat images of individuals and their contributions.
Well, the Colored Community Library is a very unique museum.
It is. It's actually a preserved historic landmark that was a Black-only library in Portsmouth. It was originally in the Lincolnville neighborhood and then was moved on a tractor trailer thanks to the hard work of the African American Historical Society to its current location on Elm Avenue. So while you're there exploring this exhibit, you can also explore the exhibit about the library itself, its history, and its contribution to Portsmouth.
It's a fantastic library.
It is. It's a very neat building. Yes, for sure. So our next exhibit that actually opens on February 19th, and it's called the Dry Dock Affair. It focuses on 1829 to 1831 at Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, which was actually the Gosport shipyard at the time. And it tells the story of both slave and free Black labor and indentured labor and their contributions to the creation of the dry dock. In fact, when that dry dock was completed in 1834, the famous dry dock one, it was the first dry dock in the Western Hemisphere.
Wow.
Right, and that wouldn't have been possible without the contributions of all the types of Black labor that happened. So it's a really great exhibit that talks about the sizes of the stones they moved, the tools they used, the people who created that dry dock, and how different their experiences were based on who they were as individuals.
Yes. Wow.
So then we go from there to the Portsmouth Art and Cultural Center, and we have a couple of exhibits opening there this spring as well. So on March 1st, Glenn McClure is doing a photography exhibit about shipyard workers in Hampton Roads, and it focuses on the lives and the faces and the stories of Black shipyard laborers across the Hampton Roads area. It's a really intimate look at them and their lives and how they got to where they are. And then the 5440 African American Quilters Guild will be opening an exhibit at the end of February at the Portsmouth Art and Cultural Center as well. And it tells the story of the stories of quilts and their impact on the Black community in Hampton Roads. So it's a really neat exploration of patterns and storytelling related to those quilts.
Wow, that's really a lot going on. And I understand there's also lectures.
Yeah, so this entire exhibit series has some complimentary lectures that go along with it. All of our lectures this year are going to be hosted at the Portsmouth Art and Cultural Center, so we're really excited about some of the things that we're bringing in. So for example, on February 22nd, Dr. Cassandra Nubity-Alexander will be here to discuss the long journey of freedom, Lord Dunmore's Ethiopian Regiment. She's a local historian and a professor at Norfolk State University, and we're just really excited for her to share about this regiment and its contribution to the area. And then on March 8th, Dr. Lyndon Upman Bronstein will be here to talk about urban slavery and the construction of Dry Dock 1. So that dry dock that you're going to learn about in that exhibit at the Naval Shipyard Museum, she's going to dig a little deeper for us and talk about how that came to be. And again, those stories that make that dry dock so important in our history. And then on March 22nd, we're welcoming Dr. Rafia Zavar, and she's going to talk about the two TMOs of North and South and their contributions to how we look at Black history now. One, George TMO, was here in the South as a publisher. His manuscript came out in the early 19th century, and he became he was an enslaved individual who became a Black elected official. Wow. And then his nephew, Robert TMO, was the first African-American journalist for the Boston Globe in the North. So there are a lot of parallels in their stories, and she's going to help us explore that. And perhaps one of the lectures I'm most excited about is on April 5th, Donald Mills, who's the president and general manager of Mills Marine and Ship Repair, is going to join us to talk about his story. It is one of the only Black-owned and operated ship repair companies in the United States. So we get to hear his story and what that has done for the Hampton Roads area as well. So there's a ton of things to choose from. All of these lectures are free, so it's a great opportunity to hear a little more about our local history from some experts.
And all those lectures are going to be at the Portsmouth Art and Cultural Center, which is housed in the old courthouse on the intersection of Port and High Street. Correct.
And again, more information on all of those is at blkhistorynow.com.
Okay, and the Naval Museum, for those who haven't been there recently, it's still at the end of High Street by the waterfront.
Absolutely, at High Street Landing, right there next to the ferry dock.
And of course, the Color Community Library is about a block from High Street on Elm Avenue.
Correct.
All right. Well, thank you for coming here and telling us about all of this, and we'll see you back at the end of the show to find out what's happening at the Children's Museum of Virginia.
Sounds great. Thanks, Rob.
The Portsmouth Public Libraries are also sponsoring special events and programs celebrating Black history. Here's Lauren White to tell us about them. Lauren, welcome to Portsmouth Now.
All right, thank you.
So you're here from the Portsmouth Public Libraries, and they are sponsoring a number of events and programs throughout February celebrating Black history. You want to tell us about some of those?
Yes, we have a ton happening. So we're going to start off with the first weekend, February 1st. We actually have 3 events. The first event is going to be at 10 a.m. and it's going to last until 4. You can drop in at any time for the African American scavenger hunt. You can gather into teams of 2 to 4 and learn about famous African Americans and win prizes. Then we have our second event. This is going to be at Churchland Branch Library. We have the Black History Storytime, and we are partnering with the African American Historical Society of Portsmouth, and they'll be reading a story and get to do a fun craft, and that is 10:30 a.m. at Churchland. Okay. And then our final event for that day is we're doing a lot of partnering this month with the Chrysler Museum of Art for our storytelling in beadwork workshop, and that's open to teen and adults at Main Library, and it's just 1 hour, 11 a.m.
Okay, the Main Library is the one on Court Street in
Yes.
Old Town. Right.
Yep. So Main Library is going to be the one that is closest to Old Town, and then Churchland, it's going to be the one closest to the YMCA.
Okay. Fantastic.
And so we're starting off with just a little bit of history, a little bit of art, and then February 3rd, we are moving over to Manor Branch Library, so of course the one attached to Manor High School. We have Dr. Margaret Bristow. She is a member of the Project 1619, and she will be discussing what was it like to be a teen in Angola in 1619. So doing a little myth busting.
Oh wow!
Yeah. So it's a teen event, but anyone is welcome to join, and that's going to be at 2 p.m.
Okay.
And then on February 8th, we are going to be doing our Amazing Artists Black History Month edition program at the Main Library. So you get to drop in from 11 to 2, do a nice art project that's inspired by a well-known African-American artist. I'll give you a hint, she is well-known in the DMV area, and she did have a big exhibition at the Chrysler a couple of years ago.
Okay.
So then after the 8th, we do have an event on the 13th. This is going to be our first Arts for Learning program. So this time we are bringing Gary Garlick. He will be at the Craddock Ranch Library, and he will be playing Caribbean classics on steel drums, and that's going to be at 3 p.m. So that's a nice little after-school activity.
Yeah.
Then on the 15th, that's another jam-packed day for us. So if you missed the Black History Month story time at Churchland, you're in luck. You can come to Main Library, catch it again.
Okay.
And if you decide you want to hang around, you're also in luck. Your kids can also do Black History STEM. That is going to be drop-in from 11 to 3. So you get to do some projects that are based on African American scientists. And then we have our annual Black History Expo, and this is for adults, but again, open to anyone who's interested in history, anything like that. That is going to be from 2 to 4, and we will have Port Town Magic. They'll be giving us a medley of African American music, and you'll be hearing from Crystal Castleberry from the Colonial Williamsburg Project. So if you've been hearing a lot of stuff about the Prairie School and First Baptist, this is your time to hear a little bit more on what they have to update before they actually open it up to the public.
Great.
So that is going to be the 15th. Then on the 18th, we have our second Arts for Learning program. That's going to be with storyteller Valerie Davis. She is going to be leading the kids through an Anansi Me program. So Anansi is the trickster spider god from West Africa, and those tales sort of traveled from West Africa to the American South, and we are going to learn more about that.
Wow.
And then you can drop in at Craddock on February 19th for a Black History Month craft. Again, nice after school from 3 to 4.
Yeah.
And then finally at Churchland on February 22nd from 10 to 4. So it's a nice full day of activities. It is our Black History Month celebration. So we get to learn about health and head wrapping, get to see quilts in the African American tradition, do beading in the African American tradition. Sort of contribute your story to the Black History Month video project that they will have going on during that event.
But that's a lot.
Yes, we have a lot this year. Yeah, we did a lot this year. They told us to bring our A game, and we certainly did.
You certainly did.
Yes.
Well, thank you for coming here. I'm sort of in awe that you could remember all.
Oh, it took a lot. The kids know me, and they would be surprised too.
If people want more information, is there a website they can go to or a number they can call?
So you can call any of the library branches. PortsVAEvents.com is going to be your best bet to find any information, but also our Facebook, Portsmouth Public Library. And we are the ones with Sailboat. Don't go to any of the ones in New Hampshire, Ohio.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, thanks so much for being here, Lauer, and telling us all about it.
Yeah, no problem.
And now, thanks to our good friends at History Alive, we're very pleased to welcome to our show, direct from the 19th and early 20th century, one of Portsmouth's most celebrated historical figures, Mr. Jeffrey Wilson. Mr. Wilson, welcome to Portsmouth Now.
Pleasant good morning to you. How are you, kind
I'm
sir?
doing really well. Now, for our audience members who may not know your story, could you tell us a little bit about yourself? Where you were born and raised, how you came to Portsmouth?
Well, my name is Jeffrey Thomas Wilson. I was born in 1843 right here in the city of Portsmouth also. I did not even know that I was a slave up until I was 10 years old when the Grice family came to get me in around 1853. So they took me to their house, and I was doing whatever work I had to do for the Grice family, but it really became like we were all family. And I even wrote in colored notes that I love my master and my master loved me also.
I would assume, from a 21st century perspective, that may have been unusual for a lot of people.
Yes, it was, because you have to remember this was a time where colors couldn't be learned to read or write or anything like that. So I was taught to read and write in privacy. Ms. Margaret Grice, she was a wonderful individual. She taught me how to read and write.
And that was illegal at the time?
Oh, it was illegal at the time.
So she was breaking the law?
Yes, because you know in 1831, they had the Nat Turner uprising.
And he was very literate.
Yes, he was, very much so. And they felt like colors learning to read and write would be dangerous, dangerous because they would be empowered if they learned to read and write. But that family taught me to read, and they taught me how to write. And I accompanied Alexander, if I'm not mistaken, Alexander Grice, to the Army also. He was in Cahoon's battalion in the Virginia Infantry, so I accompanied him even when he was in the Army.
And this was fighting for the Confederacy?
No.
I mean, you were enslaved, so you didn't have a say in it.
Right, I didn't have a say in it. But when I became a free man in 1866, I joined the Army. I joined the Navy, as a matter of fact. I went to Europe, and I learned a lot of things while I was over there, and came back over here and worked as a laborer at the Navy Yard. And labor was the thing to do back then. If you were a laborer, that meant that you had an important position in society during that time, especially if you were a colored man.
Well, especially, I mean, being literate and then having spent time in Europe, I would assume you probably knew a lot more than many of the white merchants and people here in Portsmouth who had never been to Europe.
Oh yes, exactly.
Who had never really seen much of the world outside of Virginia.
Exactly, and you know, that sort of leads me into being at Emmanuel. I know I'm kind of jumping ahead of this right here, but a lot of things that I saw while I was in Europe, I end up seeing over here in Emmanuel, because that's where they got a lot of their from the internal building. That's where they got a lot of their influences at, the gradings and everything, the drawings on the wall in Emmanuel.
This is Emmanuel African Episcopal Methodist Church.
You know, I was 14 years old when that church was built. It was built in 1857, and I was 14 years old when that church was built. And at first, it was a North Street church, and then it became, and I think it was in something like 1871, they renamed it Emmanuel, which meant God with us. And that building of that church was a labor of love and a labor of purpose, because free blacks and also free blacks and slaves also helped build that, with members of the Methodist Society also. They helped also, because we shared a church at one time.
Yeah, well, they're both Methodist tradition. They come from the same tradition.
Exactly. So we shared a building at one time, and as you might know the history, old Emmanuel was burned down by wicked hands. And then in 1857, Emmanuel was built, but it was North Street Church at that time. And when I tell you it was a labor of love, can you imagine me at the age of 14 years old seeing this church being built? Yeah. And I got to see all the hiding places of that church. As you know, it was a stop off of the Underground Railroad. And I got to see all the hiding places in that church. And at 14, I was leading people to freedom. And while I was still a slave myself, I was leading people to freedom, and it felt good. I felt like I was doing something that was bigger than myself.
Yeah, it's just 14 years old. It was such a different time where childhood was very brief.
Oh yeah.
If you had it at all.
Oh,
kids
yes.
were, especially if one was a slave. But I mean, you know, it was a different time when people took on adult responsibilities at a very young age.
As a matter of fact, my house that I inherited is right down the street from the church, and that house right here was my mother's house, and I ended up moving back there after I got out of the military, and even after I went to Emmanuel and became, for 50 years, I was the superintendent of Sunday school, which I am so proud of. And then around 1926, I believe it was, this man Norman Hamilton, he was a publisher of Portsmouth Star. And the Portsmouth Star, they were way before y'all had y'all Ledger Star. They didn't merge until 1955. But the Portsmouth Star was the vehicle to where I could write colored notes. And see, colored notes was all about what was going on in the colored community. Do you know Ida Barber death was not listed nowhere, but it was in colored notes in 1925. I put her death in.
So there was no published outlet then for the news about what was happening in the black community?
Oh, no, there wasn't. As a matter of fact, we were living in Lincolnsville. We couldn't even get mail down in Lincolnsville. We had to have two white gentlemen to go down to the post office to get our mail in the mailbox.
Now, you're using the name Lincolnville. Where that doesn't exist anymore as Lincolnville, does it?
It doesn't exist, but in our hearts it still exists.
So where was that as far as where, like, modern day?
Well, that area where Emmanuel AME Church is, that whole area was called Lincolnsville. It was from North Street all the way down towards the end of I can't think of the name, towards Effingham Street.
Okay.
What is Effingham Street now?
Sure.
But they ran all the way into each other. And Lincolnsville included all that territory back there.
Okay.
And that was all colors back there during that time.
So it's post after the Civil Wars when all that community was built, give them the name.
Exactly. You know who it was named
Yeah,
after,
of course.
too. Yes, but it was a wonderful community, and the whole community idea was about work and labor and making the whole community a better place to live for everybody.
Well, I think just the work must have been wonderful when you could actually do work for your own benefit, for the
Yes.
benefit of your family and friends, as opposed to just laboring for someone else.
Yes, it did. And everybody in Lincolnville had a moniker of work that they would do. You know, I was also a bailiff for the Norfolk City Jail. I was bailiff for there, and I had several jobs, but my most gratifying job was being the superintendent of Sunday school for 50 years at that great branch of Zion Emmanuel AME Church.
And the thing that really lived on are the colored notes. I mean, those are now, you can read many of those online, can't you?
Right, you can now. I know people say it's hard to find, but if you dig deep enough, you can find colored notes. And the reason I call it colored notes, because I would have people to leave little notes about what was going on in their community. I mean, people up in Maine and everywhere would leave little notes at the Wanamaker's pharmacy or a certain pharmacy. I would pick those notes up and I would put them in the paper. Now you have to remember, colored notes was in the Portsmouth Star, but it was on the last page, behind the comic strips, underneath the warn ads.
Well, this was easy to find. You just go to the last page and there it is.
But you know, the good thing about it, it increased the Portsmouth Star's publication by something like 50%.
Well, suddenly people have a reason, if you're a colored, you have a reason to buy the paper.
Yes, and I never went by my own name. I always went by Ye Scribe.
And why was that? Was it
Well,
the
because
fear of
I was
retribution?
Yes, I feared that if they found out exactly who I was, but believe me, the people in the community, they all knew who I was. They knew who Ye Scribe
For the
was.
greater community.
Right. So we got a lot of information about births, about deaths, about what was going on, about social events, even there. And that was sort of a dangerous time to be criticizing what was going on in the Jim Crow South.
Sure.
You know, it was a very dangerous time. But this particular colored notes, it enabled people to sort of communicate and keep in touch with what was going on with other colored people everywhere elsewhere.
And now those notes are a great resource for anybody in the future, now or in the future, any historian that wants to know what Black life was like in the 1920s and thereafter in this area. They have that primary source now that they can go to.
They have that.
So you really have contributed to history, American history.
Well, thank you so very much. I actually began writing it in 1917, well, earlier than that, because I kept notes. And what I do, I transfer those notes and update them. Once I started doing colored notes, I started updating them. But this whole time, and I keep using the word labor because I use the word labor because that's what everything was then. To build that church was a labor of love. To build that church was a labor of purpose. And everybody, to build this church, and so many little intricate things I could tell you, like the church had no nails whatsoever in this church because there was, we believed that Jesus Christ was hung on a certain type of wood. And that wood was on the property that we built the church at. And we didn't want to drive another nail through the wood. So this church was built without no nails whatsoever. We pieced the pieces together. And if you look in that church right now, you still see some of the old benches that still have been pieced together.
And they're not coming apart.
They're not coming apart at all.
They're not coming apart.
They're not coming apart. From 1857 up until right now, they're still not coming apart.
Yeah. Well, this month is February is Black History Month. You mentioned Emmanuel AME. Are there things going on that you know of?
Oh yes. Well, you know, we have tours. We have the African American tour, but we have a special tour when it comes to Emmanuel AME. We have the tour of the church. We let people come in and visit the church, and they look up at the ceiling, and I get to tell them a little bit about what the ceiling means and what the different painting means and what the 12 posts around the church means. And it's just a beautiful edifice. It's a beautiful edifice.
Great. Well, thank you so much for coming and visiting us today and telling us about yourself and your accomplishments and your contributions.
Well, God bless you, sir. God bless you in everything that you do. Thank you so very much.
If you want to explore the expansively rich history of Portsmouth at any time of the year, the good folks at History Alive are on hand to help at any time. Here's Karen Washburn to tell us what they offer. Karen, welcome back to Portsmouth Now.
Thanks so much, Rob. I feel like it's been a long time since I've been here.
It has been a long time, but it's always great to have you here. Now, for those viewers who may not know this, you are the creative director of History Alive, which is your organization sponsors historical reenactors and tours of Portsmouth's history.
Well, we're more interpreters than reenactors,
Yeah.
and some people don't understand the difference. But a reenactor is more representative of the time period and the way they dress, and I mean there are little particular things that they're very careful about. Interpreters, we interpret the past, so our people are time travelers. I always say we're not trying to bring you back to our time. We have come to your time, and I think that might be the main difference. Is with reenactment, they're trying to immerse you in their period, whereas we've come into your period to tell you about our lives.
Okay, so just a few moments ago, I interviewed Stephen Alexander, playing Mr. Wilson, and would he be a reenactor then or interpreter?
He's an interpreter, and he is, I would say, the most talented interpreter we have.
He's wonderful.
He interprets many, many different characters and does so well, and he really immerses himself in the vernacular of the day and the clothing of the period, and does tremendous. All of our interpreters do a tremendous amount of research on their characters.
When I interviewed him, I just okay, I'm talking to Jeffrey Wilson, and I even commented a couple of times. I thought we talked about not only he was a slave and pointing out that but you were the exception, probably. And the vernacular of the times, the use of the word colored, which is something that might offend people now, but in the early 20th century, that is the way Black Americans refer to themselves as well.
Well, and even when I was a child, that was a polite word.
Yeah.
When I was a child, and but today we run into people on the street all the time who might be offended by that word, or offended by the fact even that I'm dressed in colonial attire, or one of the other characters is, and I'm white, because they automatically assume that I was a slave owner. And some people ask me about it in a conversational tone,
right.
And other people are very accusatory, as though and so. But we find that when we run into these situations, if we can just engage the person and talk to them. And share our character and our character's perspective, they always walk away with a smile on their face.
One of the plagues, probably of the internet. One of the good things is we can research history. Everybody can jump on there, and if you dig deep, you can get to the facts. But there's a lot out there that misinterprets things. And a lot of us, I think today, we're so wrapped up in our 21st century personal perspective of things that we've lost the ability of, I guess, any sort of objectivity.
And empathy.
And empathy.
And not just empathy for just trying to put yourself in somebody else's shoes.
Yeah, this is not justifying
you know.
any injustices from the past,
Right.
but just from a human perspective.
Right.
What were these human beings dealing with?
And oftentimes, especially African American history, can be very uncomfortable.
Of course.
The telling of it, but that doesn't mean we need to stop telling it.
No.
And that's one of the reasons why we always choose all of our characters, no matter what culture they're from, are heroic
Yes.
characters, because in telling their story, we can present their perspective on things. In fact, we just removed one of our characters, which is Andrew Sproul. Everyone knows that he founded the shipyard, but very few people know that he was very involved in the transatlantic slave trade and also in the American slave trade from the Caribbean. And so that knocks him off the heroes list as far as we're concerned.
Sure.
And which brings us to this being Black History Month. I know that there's an exhibit that is going to be at the Naval Shipyard Museum. The theme this month is for this year is labor, African Americans in labor, and so the Naval Shipyard is a huge example of how enslaved people, free Blacks, poor Irish, anyone that was considered low enough class where they were basically considered expendable.
Yes.
You know, and it would be shameful of us not to recognize the contribution of their blood and their sweat, and I'm sure loss of life, that occurred because I'm sure many of the things that they did were dangerous.
Well, the thing is, back then, all people, even rich people, still worked. You know, somebody who had a life of leisure by their standards, we would look at their daily life and think, wow, they had to do a lot.
Right.
But I mean, work was such a part of human existence. Basically, you woke up and worked until the sun went down and you slept.
But in the case of the shipyard, that many of them didn't have a choice.
Right.
Many of them really physically did not have a choice because there was someone making sure of it.
Yes.
And then others, because of their poverty, didn't have a choice.
Right.
But as I said, that is a contribution to the building of that shipyard, which was a contribution to the building of America.
Right.
And so the people that labored in the shipyard, who were African American, because that's what we're celebrating this month, that is a contribution to the building of America, and their story deserves to be told. And I'm really encouraged that stories like George Timo, who was the first, he was elected, Black people didn't vote back then, so he was a Black man elected by whites, who was very instrumental in seeing that the salaries and the people working at the shipyard got salaries that were equal.
Yeah.
And he really fought for conditions there and everything, and he was very important. But his story isn't told very often.
Yeah.
And even James Fayette, who is now, and I'm happy to say, just about every public school fifth grader in the whole city of Portsmouth knows who he is. Yeah. They were having a parade one Saturday when he was strolling. When Stephen, who plays James Fayette, was strolling, and they called him. He wasn't even in costume. Yeah. Sometimes he's not even in costume and children recognize him. I think he was in costume this time, but they pulled him into the parade. James Fayette, you have to be in the parade. And that's exciting to me when children call to us from across the street and know who we are. And really, James Fayette is the main one that they know because he's an historic figure that they've studied.
And whose contribution was pivotal to the ending of the Revolutionary War. And someone that probably no one up until about 10 to 15 years ago knew anything about.
And then there's little nuances in their lives, especially even their names. Like James Fayette, we're on kind of almost like a personal mission to make sure that people stop calling him James Armistead, which identifies him with his owner, the person who claimed to own him, and then also Lafayette. Yeah. He signed his name James Fayette. People are identified. When they sign their name, that's what they want to be called. Yeah. Yes?
Yes.
So that's the way he needs to be identified. And I like it because it recognizes his affection for Lafayette, but gives him his own identity. Yeah. And certainly there are many families today who their name descended down, and it was originally one of the master's names.
Right.
And if that was their choice, there's nothing wrong with that. That was as long as it's a name that they choose.
Yes.
But when someone who was enslaved chooses a different name when they become free,
Then that's their name.
that should be honored.
Yes.
And so, and William Billy Flora, he was never called Billy, we found out. We've been calling him Billy Flora all this time, interpreting him. And we found out he was never called Billy. That was something that the people that, that told his story later on called him.
Wow.
So, you find these little things and it makes you almost passionate of trying to set it right.
Yes.
So it's not only that the stories aren't told, but often they're told incorrectly.
Yes.
And so I think in our little way, we're helping with the movement toward telling that history better.
And I think in understanding them as each of these people as individual human beings.
Right. Yes, and as Americans, and as you said, part of the fabric of American history. It's almost like if you envision our history as a quilt. It's like there's a bunch of these patches missing that need to be put back into the fabric of our American history.
Each patch is beautiful within itself, has value within itself, but it's only a quilt that keeps wrong when they're all brought together.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so I'm really encouraged by that trend. And I'm so grateful to Stephen because Stephen and I have known each other for 30 years and we are very much family to each other. And so when we embarked on this about 5 years ago, he was, it was a given that he would come into it with us.
Now, this month, there's some events going on. I believe there's something going on at Emmanuel AME.
Yes, we partnered last year with Emmanuel and did a Front Porch Talk series, which went over really well. But this year, we're kind of laying back a little because Portsmouth itself, the city of Portsmouth, has got so many wonderful things going on. And so Emmanuel is going to do something different this year. They're going to display, let me get this right now, the Lincolnsville photo exhibit on loan from Hill House Museum Archives will be at Emmanuel AMA. Okay. And you can go to History Alive website to find out information about that. And we're not doing walking tours in February because we've done it in the past and it's just too cold.
Yeah.
But we will be doing interior tours of Emmanuel Church, private tours. And when I say private, all you have to do is call and schedule it. It's just not just going to be a scheduled
tour. So what is the website that we go to?
historyalive.info.
Okay.
If you go to historyalive.info, you'll see all that. You'll see all of our history offerings, including African American history, things that we do. We go into the schools, and we will have characters available. James Fayette will be available during the month of February. And actually, our characters are available all year long.
But that's what I want to say.
But in particular, yes.
Throughout the year, we have you here several times, and there are themes or big events going on. And a lot of times, if it's history related, you're a part of it. Right. But you offer tours throughout the year to anyone.
We do. Okay.
And
we also, our characters are available, like in March, this is the second year in a row, we're going to do the STEAM event out at Churchill Middle School, which is a citywide event for all the middle school students. And most people are familiar with STEM, but they add the A in there for the arts.
Yeah.
And George Washington Carver is the perfect person because most people don't know this, but he was, in addition to being a scientist and an inventor and all that, he was also a pianist. He also was an artist. A visual artist. He painted, and he was. We just uncovered this fact, just about last month. He was a stand-up comic.
Okay.
So, which is great because Stephen is actually in his spare time is a stand-up comic. So.
That's great. But if it's just Tuesday in any month of the year, and you think, I've heard about Portsmouth and Old Town. I'd like to learn more of the history. They can go to History Live.
They can. We like to have at least 24 hours notice, but we have just thrown on a costume and hopped in the car just because somebody called us.
You all are so well versed in all this. You can do that.
Yes, and we also have some people that actually live in Old Town, which also makes it convenient.
Yeah.
So if they're available, we also have been doing a lot of tours with the cruise ships, and we're hoping to do more of those this year. And even we've got a proposal in to even have some of our characters go on board ship to do some things there.
That's great.
So we're trying to promote Portsmouth and its history as much as we can.
All right. So for viewers who might decide a week from now, 8 months from now, I maybe would like to look at taking one of those tours.
Go to historyalive.info and click tours at the top, and it will take you right there to all of our private tours. Give you the phone number, you give us a call, we schedule it, you pay right there online, and it's a done deal. So,
Well, thank you so much for what you're doing, really, for
you're
bringing
very
history alive here.
well, I appreciate you having us on so we can tell people about it.
I'm glad to have you here. Thank you for coming. Now we're going to take a look at the things happening at the Children's Museum of Virginia throughout February. Welcome back, Aaron Colston. Well, now we're going to welcome back to Portsmouth now, the Children's Museum of Virginia Curator of Fun, Aaron Colston. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Rob.
So you're back here, you're going to tell us about what's happening at the Children's Museum in February.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have loads of fun stuff happening at the Children's Museum. And the first two things are related to the Black History Now series in Portsmouth. So the first being that every week we're focusing on a Black scientist in our STEM studio. So we want families to come and explore the Black contributions that have been made by scientists throughout history, some of them even local. They'll get a chance to do an experiment as well as take some activity sheets home with them. In addition, on Saturday, February 8th, we're going to talk about city planning and the Black contributions to that. So kids will have a chance to work with an oversized city map and work with different activities that might happen in a city to make a city happen, talking about some of those incredible contributions throughout history in Portsmouth.
Great.
Yeah, so we're super excited.
Yeah, now I understand is there something coming to the traveling exhibit room?
It is, and it's already open.
Okay.
All aboard for some fun, Rob. Thomas and Friends Explore the Rails opens on Saturday, January 25th at the Children's Museum of Virginia. You'll get a chance to meet Thomas and some of his friends in almost real life and explore the island of Sodor. So there's a chance to move luggage and fix trains, get on board a train, and even play with a giant rail set that looks like the island of Sodor. So we're really excited to have all of our friends come to Knapford Station and hang out with Thomas.
You are a person who really loves her job.
I do love my job. I have the best job in the city.
Well, thank you for coming here and sharing your enthusiasm and all the information. And if people want more information on the Children's Museum of Virginia, is there a website or a number to call?
Absolutely. Visit childrensmuseumva.com for all the information about our exhibits, our events, and to reserve your tickets before you come to play.
Fantastic. Thanks for being here, Aaron.
Thanks again for having me, Rob.
That's it for our show today. If you'd like to find out more about any of the events featured on today's show or any other events taking place in Portsmouth throughout the month of February, simply log on to www.portsvacation.com and then come to Portsmouth, where if you give us a day, we'll give you a vacation. I'm Rob Lauer. Join me next month for the March episode of Portsmouth Now.